My heart froze when I got the call from my pilot son. "Mom, it is impossible. Your daughter-in-law Emily is on my flight to Paris, but you just told me she is at home taking a bath." At that exact moment, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. A familiar voice spoke. "It is so good to be home." I looked at the person speaking. It was the same face my son swore was miles away, boarding a plane. That was when I realized there was an imposter living under my roof. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to Grandma's Revenge Tales and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories travel. I have always considered myself a good observer. As a 67-year-old widow, I have lived with my oldest son, Michael, his wife Emily, and my 8-year-old grandson, Lucas, in the same house for nearly a decade. Our days passed with a quiet routine in the suburbs of Chicago, where the biggest drama used to be when my grandson spilled juice on the tablecloth. Michael works as an engineer at a construction firm, leaving early and coming back late. Always tired but satisfied. My youngest son, Andrew, fulfilled his childhood dream of becoming a commercial pilot, visiting us only a few times a month due to his unpredictable schedule. As for Emily, my daughter-in-law, I always considered her the model of perfection. Organized, dedicated to her son, attentive to Michael, and affectionate with me. At least, that was what I thought. That September morning began like any other. Michael left for work before dawn, Lucas got on the school bus, and Emily mentioned she would take a quick bath after tidying up the kitchen. I was washing the breakfast dishes when the phone rang. "Mom, it is Andrew. I have a few free minutes during a layover." The lively voice of my youngest son warmed my heart. We spoke briefly about his work, his layovers, until his voice changed tone. "Mom, something very strange just happened. Emily is on my flight." I was confused. "Impossible, Andrew. She is here at home. She just went up to take a shower." "Mom, I'm looking at her right this second. I am in the passenger cabin and she is sitting in first class next to a well-dressed man. They look intimate." A chill ran down my spine. "You must be mistaken. Emily is here." I hear the shower running. I am not mistaken. I recognize my sister-in-law and, to confirm, I just checked the passenger list. Emily Miller, seat 3A. At that moment, I heard the shower turn off. My heart raced. "I have to hang up, Andrew. Call me later." I whispered, putting the phone in my apron pocket. Emily came down the stairs with wet hair, wearing a light blue dress. "Margaret, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need anything?" "No, dear," I replied, forcing a smile while I observed every detail of her. It was Emily, without a doubt. The same delicate face, the same brown eyes, the same kind smile. How could she be in two places at the same time? After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, trembling. Andrew's call hammered in my mind. He would not lie about something like that, but I also could not deny what my own eyes had seen. Emily had been in our house just minutes ago. In the following weeks, I began to pay closer attention. Small details that previously went unnoticed now seemed to scream at me. There were days when Emily was sweet and patient with Lucas, singing him to sleep. On others, she barely looked at the boy, responding with irritation when he asked for help with homework. One day, she wrote with her right hand. The next, she used her left. "I am practicing," she explained when I asked. Sometimes she left saying she was going to the supermarket wearing a white blouse and came back wearing a completely different one. I started documenting everything in an old notebook. I wrote down the times she left, what she was wearing, her mood, how she treated Lucas. It seemed crazy, but the more I observed, the more convinced I was that something was very wrong. Grandma. Lucas asked me one afternoon, "Why is Mom sometimes so nice and other times so mean to me?" Yesterday she helped me with my drawing and said it was beautiful. Today she did not even want to look at it. His confused little face broke my heart. It was not just me noticing the changes. My neighbor Helen also commented, "Margaret, your daughter-in-law, seems different every day. Last week she greeted me so cheerfully. She asked about my grandkids. Yesterday she passed me on the street and did not even recognize me. I did not tell anyone my suspicions." How could I explain something so absurd, that my daughter-in-law might not be one single person, that maybe there was someone impersonating her? Michael worked so much that he barely noticed the inconsistencies, and I did not want to worry him without concrete proof. Finally, I decided I needed to discover the truth. One Thursday morning, when Emily said she was going to the store, I waited a few minutes and followed her. I put a scarf on my head and kept my distance, my heart beating so hard I thought she might hear it. Instead of taking the usual route to the market, Emily turned down a narrow street that led to a simpler neighborhood. She walked with purpose, never looking back. I hid behind a pole when she stopped in front of a small house with peeling paint and knocked on the door. The door opened and Emily entered. I waited almost an hour hiding on the corner until the door opened again. My blood froze in my veins. Two women came out, identical in appearance but dressed differently. One was Emily in the dress she wore when she left the house. The other wore simpler clothes but had exactly the same face. They hugged quickly before heading in opposite directions. I ran back home, my mind a whirlwind. I needed to tell someone, but who would believe me? I called my lifelong friend, Linda. "I need to see you now. It is urgent," I told her, my voice shaking. We met at the coffee shop on the corner where I shared my discoveries, showing her my notebook. Linda listened without interrupting. Her eyes went wide as I described what I had seen. "Margaret, this sounds crazy, but you have to follow your gut. If something bad is happening, you need to protect your family." When I returned home, Emily, or whoever she was in the kitchen making dinner, acting as if nothing was wrong. I watched her in silence, wondering how many times she had deceived me, how many times a stranger had slept under my roof, pretending to be part of my family. That night I could not sleep. The image of the two identical women would not leave my mind. Who was the real Emily? And more importantly, why this elaborate charade? The next morning I made a decision. I had to go back to that house and find out who the other woman was. I waited until Emily left to take Lucas to school, and I left right after, my heart racing as I retraced the path from the day before. The house seemed even smaller in the daylight, with a small wooden porch and faded curtains in the windows. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door, trying to control the shaking in my hands. A young woman opened the door. It was not Emily, but a thin girl with her hair in a tight bun. "Can I help you?" she asked with a suspicious look. "I need to speak to the girl who lives here," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "The one who looks like my daughter-in-law." The young woman hesitated, looking back as if seeking guidance from someone inside the house. Finally, she opened the door wider. "Come in. My name is Sarah. I am a friend of Julia." Julia. A name I had never heard before, but that would soon change everything I thought I knew about my family. The house was simple, but clean, with worn furniture and a few framed photos on the walls. In a corner, an elderly woman coughed in a makeshift bed. The smell of medicine filled the air. "Wait here," Sarah said, disappearing through a door. A few minutes later, she returned accompanied by a woman who made my heart stop. She was exactly like Emily, the same face, the same eyes, the same body structure. The only difference was the expression of fear in her gaze and the simplicity of her clothes. "Mrs. Margaret?" she asked. Her voice was a whisper. "Who are you?" I asked directly. "Why are you identical to my daughter-in-law?" The woman sat down slowly, her hands trembling. "My name is Julia. Emily is my twin sister." A heavy silence fell over us. Twins. Emily had never mentioned having a sister, much less an identical twin. "Go on," I insisted, needing to hear the whole story. "We were separated at birth," Julia explained, her voice low. "Our biological mother did not have the means to raise two girls. Emily was adopted by a wealthy family. I stayed with my adoptive mother, Miss Elise." She pointed to the lady in the bed. "We grew up in completely different worlds. I did not even know I had a sister until 3 years ago, when we met by chance at a medical clinic." Sarah approached, putting a hand on Julia's shoulder. "Tell her the whole truth." Julia took a deep breath, tears beginning to form. Emily looked for me after she found out about me. At first, I thought it was so we could have a sisterly relationship, but she had other plans. She offered me money to impersonate her sometimes. Why, I asked, my stomach tightening, so she could meet with someone without raising suspicion. The revelation hit me like a punch. Emily was cheating on my son and using her own twin sister as an alibi. At first, I refused, Julia continued, but my adoptive mother got very sick. We needed money for medicine, for rent. Emily offered an amount I could not refuse. I looked at the lady in the bed, her breathing difficult, and felt a mixture of compassion and anger. I understood Julia's desperation, but I could not forgive Emily's manipulation. How many times have you been in my house pretending to be Emily? Many, Julia admitted, ashamed. She taught me how to act, what to say, even how to write like her, but I was never good at it. I am left-handed, Emily is right-handed. Sometimes I forgot details, I got nervous. My grandson noticed. I said, remembering Lucas's words about how his mother's behavior changed. He felt the difference between you two. Julia covered her face with her hands. I know. I tried to be nice to him, but I'm not an actress. Emily told me not to get attached, to just pretend. But how can you not get attached to such a sweet boy? I looked at the photos on the walls. None of them showed Julia with Emily. It was as if their lives had never formally crossed. Where is Emily now? In Paris, with Richard. He is an executive at a multinational company. They met 2 years ago and fell in love. Or at least that is what Emily says. The name Richard resonated in my mind. Andrew had mentioned that Emily was sitting next to a man in first class. Everything was starting to make sense. The frequent trips to the store, the mood swings, the different clothes. Why are you telling me all this now? Because I am tired of lying, Julia replied, looking up. Every time I go to your house, I see how good Michael is, how loving Lucas is, how you treat me with respect. I cannot stand being part of this farce. Sarah intervened. I tried to convince her to stop months ago. I told her this would end badly for everyone. But Emily threatened to stop helping financially if Julia did not continue. I felt the weight of the situation on my shoulders. I had discovered the truth, but what would I do with it? How would I tell Michael that his wife was not only cheating on him, but also using a stunt double to cover up her affairs? I need proof, I said finally. Something I can show Michael so he believes me. Julia and Sarah exchanged glances. After a moment, Julia got up and went to a drawer, taking out an envelope. Emily sends me written instructions, details on what I should do, how to act, how long to stay. There are also receipts for bank transfers, and there are letters from her to Richard that I found when she gave me clothes to wear. I took that envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. Inside was the proof of the betrayal, the deceit, the manipulation that had happened under my own roof. "What are you going to do, ma'am?" Julia asked with an anxious look. "What any mother would do," I replied, putting the envelope in my purse. "Protect my family." Before leaving, I looked at Julia one last time. Despite the identical appearance, I could now see how different she was from Emily. There was a genuine kindness in her eyes, a sincere remorse. "Julia, you are not guilty of your sister's wickedness," I told her softly. "But you need to stop being her accomplice." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I know. I just did not know how to get out of this situation." "Now you have a chance," I replied. "We are going to end this charade." The walk back home was the longest of my life. Every step seemed heavier than the last, the envelope in my purse burning like an ember. How would I tell Michael that the woman with whom he had built a life, the mother of his child, was living a double existence? When I arrived home, I found it empty. Emily, the fake Emily, who I now knew was Julia, had taken Lucas to school and had not returned yet. Michael was at work. I sat at the kitchen table, emptying the contents of the envelope. The letters were explicit, describing past encounters and future plans. Emily wrote to Richard with a passion she had never shown for my son. She spoke about a future together, about how she was tired of her mediocre life and how she dreamed of living in Paris with him. There were detailed instructions for Julia. Stay in the house until Friday. Michael rarely notices any difference. Just make sure not to use your left hand in front of him. And, what was even more painful, do not get attached to Lucas. He is not your son. It is just part of the arrangement. The bank statements showed regular transfers to an account in the name of Julia Alvarez, a different last name than Emily's, evidence of their separate origins, considerable sums, always on the days when Emily was supposedly traveling. I put everything away again when I heard the front door open. Julia entered, looking nervous, wearing the clothes that belonged to my daughter-in-law. "Mrs. Margaret," she greeted, trying to maintain the charade. "You can stop, Julia," I replied calmly. "I know everything." Her face went pale and she dropped the bag she was carrying. For a moment, I thought she was going to faint. "Sit down," I offered. "We need to talk about what happens now." Julia sank into the chair, looking simultaneously relieved and terrified. "Are you going to tell Michael everything?" "Eventually, yes. But first, I need to understand the situation better." I poured her a glass of water, watching her hands shake as she took it. "When does Emily return from Paris?" "Tomorrow night. She sent me a message saying she will be late and that I should leave without anyone noticing. And how do you usually make this switch?" "She sends me a message when she is on her way. I leave through the back door. I meet her at the bus stop 3 blocks from here. We change clothes in the bathroom of the corner coffee shop. The coldness of the scheme surprised me. So calculated, so impersonal, as if it were just a business transaction and not a devastating betrayal." "How long has this been going on?" "Almost 2 years," Julia replied, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Since she met Richard at a party at Michael's company. Ironically, it was Michael who introduced them. The cruel irony of the situation did not escape me. My son, unknowingly, had introduced his wife to the man she would cheat on him with. And Lucas, how does he handle these changes?" Julia's face softened at the mention of my grandson. He notices more than anyone. Sometimes he asks me why I am different. I try to be nice to him, but Emily warns me not to create bonds. "You like him, do not you?" I observed. "How could I not like him?" she responded with tears in her eyes. "He is a wonderful boy, smart, sensitive. Emily does not realize how lucky she is." In that moment, something changed inside me. The anger I felt for Julia began to transform into something more complex. She was also a victim of Emily's manipulations, trapped in desperate circumstances, trying to care for her sick adoptive mother. "What will happen to your mother if she stops receiving money from Emily?" Julia sighed deeply. "I do not know. The medicines are expensive. The rent is always late. I work as a seamstress, but I do not earn enough." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door. Lucas returning from school alone, as he did on Wednesdays when he only had a half day. "Grandma! Mom!" he exclaimed, running to hug Julia, who hesitated for a second before hugging him back. I watched the scene with a broken heart. Lucas was hugging someone he thought was his mother, not knowing that the real one was thousands of miles away, planning to abandon him. "How was school today, honey?" I asked him, trying to maintain normalcy. "Great. I got the top grade on the science project." He turned to Julia. "Mom, will you help me with the next project? It is about the solar system." I saw the conflict in Julia's eyes, the desire to say yes, to get involved, countered by the knowledge that she would not be there to help him. "Of course, my love." She finally replied, stroking his hair. When Lucas went up to change clothes, I turned to Julia. "This cannot continue. I know," she whispered, "but I am afraid of what Emily will do when she finds out I told you everything. Leave Emily to me." I responded with a determination I did not know I possessed. Now we need to decide how we are going to proceed. We spent the rest of the afternoon formulating a plan. Michael would arrive late that night, an important meeting at the company. Lucas would be sleeping. It would be the perfect time to confront Emily when she arrived from Paris. Julia agreed not to show up for the usual swap at the bus stop. Instead, she would be at our house, hidden in my room. When Emily arrived, frustrated at not finding Julia, I would confront her with the evidence. "What will happen to me after?" Julia asked, the fear evident in her voice. "You are not the villain of this story," I replied. "We will help you and your mother somehow." That night, after Lucas fell asleep, Julia and I sat in the living room in silence, waiting. She had called Sarah, asking her to stay with her mother, explaining the situation. Now we were together, united by circumstances we could never have imagined. Michael called to say he would sleep at the office. The project required him to work all night. I felt a knot in my chest, knowing that tomorrow his life would change forever. "How did you two meet?" I asked Julia, trying to fill the tense silence. "At the neighborhood health clinic. I was accompanying my mother. Emily was there getting routine tests. The receptionist confused us, called my name when it was her turn. When we saw each other, it was like looking in a mirror." "What did she say?" "She was surprised, then curious. We exchanged phone numbers. She invited me for coffee. She asked me many questions about my life, my family. We discovered that our birth certificates had the same hospital, the same date. We investigated and confirmed that we were twins separated at birth." "And when did she propose this arrangement?" Julia looked down. "A few months later, she said she needed a favor, that she would pay well. At first, it was just a few hours, then whole days. The clock showed almost midnight when we heard the sound of keys in the door. Julia stood up, frightened, but I signaled for her to hide in my room as we had agreed. The door opened and Emily entered, dragging a small suitcase with wheels. She stopped abruptly when she saw me sitting in the dark living room. "Margaret? What are you doing up so late?" "Waiting for you, Emily," I replied, turning on the light. "Or should I say, waiting to know the truth about your double life." Emily's face froze in a mask of surprise, quickly replaced by a calculating expression I had never seen before. It was as if a mask had fallen, revealing a completely different person from the one I thought I knew for so many years. "I do not know what you are talking about," she replied, trying to maintain composure as she put the suitcase on the floor. "I am returning from a visit to my friend Jessica, like I told you. Do not lie to me anymore, Emily." My voice came out firmer than I expected. "I know you were in Paris with Richard. I know about Julia, your twin sister. I know about the entire farce you have created." She paled, her eyes quickly calculating her options. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny everything, but then her shoulders slumped and a cold smile appeared on her lips. "How did you find out?" she asked, abandoning the pretense. "Andrew saw you on the plane to Paris, the same day you were supposedly at home." Emily laughed, a humorless sound that made my hair stand on end. I always knew having a pilot brother-in-law was a risk. How inconvenient! The coldness with which she spoke surprised me. Where was the woman I thought I knew all these years? The dedicated mother? The loving wife? Why, Emily? Why do this to Michael, to Lucas? She threw her bag on the sofa and let out an impatient sigh. "Look around, Margaret. This house, this life, it is suffocating. Michael is a good man, but he is so predictable. He works like a robot, comes home, eats dinner, sleeps, repeats, without any ambition beyond his little annual promotion. Richard is different. He has vision, grand plans. We are about to move to Paris permanently. And Lucas, your 8-year-old son who adores you?" Something flickered in her gaze, but only for a second. "Lucas will be fine. Michael is a good father, and apparently Julia likes playing mommy. Maybe she can continue in the role, since she seems to have adapted so well." The cruelty of her words left me breathless. How could someone speak like that about their own son? "And how long did you intend to keep this up?" I asked. "How long did you think you could have 2 parallel lives?" "Usually the time needed to organize everything. Richard is finalizing the transfer to the Paris office. In a few weeks, I would simply disappear. Michael would receive the divorce papers, and that is it. Do you really think it would be that simple? That you could abandon your child without consequences? Emily shrugged. People move on. Children are adaptable. At that moment, I heard a sound coming from the hallway. Julia had come out of the room and was standing there, watching her twin sister with a mixture of fear and repulsion. Emily saw her and her face hardened. "You," she said with contempt. "I should have guessed you would not be reliable. How many times did I tell you not to get involved? It was a simple job. Pretend to be me, follow instructions, get the money. Simple for you," Julia replied, her voice shaking. "Not for me. Not when I had to look into the eyes of that boy who thought I was his mother. Not when I saw Michael working late to provide a better life for the family you are abandoning." Emily rolled her eyes, always so dramatic. "That is why I had to be stricter with Lucas when I replaced you, to compensate for how much you spoiled him when you were in my place." The revelation fell like a bomb. The times when Lucas was confused about why his mother was sometimes affectionate and other times cold were not just Julia and Emily alternating. It was Emily being deliberately harsher to correct the affection Julia gave the child. "You are a monster," I whispered. "I am practical," Emily corrected. "And speaking of being practical, what do you intend to do now, Margaret? Tell everything to Michael? Destroy the family? Lucas would be the most hurt." "The family is already destroyed," I replied. "You took care of that." Emily stepped closer, her tone suddenly conciliatory. "Think about it carefully. We could come to an agreement. I give Michael full custody of Lucas. I do not ask for alimony. I disappear quietly. No scandals, no unnecessary trauma. It is better for everyone. Better for you, you mean. For everyone." She insisted. "Michael keeps his dignity. Lucas does not need to know he was abandoned. You keep your family together in some form." I looked at Julia, who seemed so different from her sister in that moment, despite the identical faces. There was goodness in her eyes, genuine remorse. "And Julia?" I asked. "What happens to her?" Emily shrugged. "She goes back to her life. We already paid her enough for the old lady's medicine for a good while." "My mother," Julia corrected, her voice firm. "The woman who raised me when our biological mother could not keep both of us." "Whatever," Emily replied, impatient. "The point is that we can resolve this discreetly. No one needs to get hurt more than necessary." I looked at her, at this woman who for years I considered part of my family, and I saw only a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who treated human lives like pieces on a board. "No," I replied firmly. "There will be no deal. Michael deserves to know the truth. Lucas deserves parents who love him genuinely." Emily's face hardened. "You are making a mistake. Think about the scandal, about the trauma for Lucas. The trauma already exists. Every time you treated your son with coldness to compensate for Julia's affection, you hurt him. Every lie you told, every moment you preferred to be with another man instead of with your family, all that already caused damage." Emily grabbed her bag, her face a mask of contained fury. "Do what you want, but know that Michael will never be the same after he knows. Men have fragile egos. Being betrayed, deceived for so long, he may not recover." "My son is stronger than you think," I replied, "much stronger than you deserve." Emily turned to Julia, who remained in the same spot, trembling slightly. "And you? Do you think you are going to gain something from this? That you are going to take my place like in a fairy tale? Do not be naive. I do not want your place," Julia replied with dignity. "I just want to stop lying, stop being an accomplice in hurting good people." Emily laughed, a harsh and joyless sound. "How noble! We will see how long that nobility lasts when your mother needs medicine you cannot pay for. We will find a solution." I intervened, one that does not involve deceiving and manipulating people. Emily shook her head, as if we were being ridiculously naive. I am going to spend the night at a hotel. Tomorrow I will come back to get my things. If you want to tell Michael before that, it is your problem." She headed to the door, stopping only to say, "And Margaret, do not think this is over. I still have legal rights over Lucas." When the door closed behind her, Julia collapsed onto the sofa, shaking uncontrollably. "Has she always been like this?" I asked her, sitting by her side. "I do not know," Julia replied. When we met, she seemed so interested, so kind, but over time I realized it was just curiosity, not affection. She always saw me as a tool, never as a sister. We sat in silence for a few minutes, processing everything that had happened. "What do we do now?" Julia asked finally. "First, you will spend the night here. It is not safe to go back home at this hour. Tomorrow I will talk to Michael. He deserves to hear the truth from me. And Lucas, the mention of my grandson broke my heart. For now, we will tell him nothing. Children notice more than we imagine, but we need to find the right words at the right time." That night was the longest of my life. I prepared the guest room for Julia, who fell asleep exhausted after so much tension. I, however, could not close my eyes. I sat in the kitchen, replaying in my mind the years of living with Emily, looking for signs I should have noticed, moments when I should have realized something was wrong. In the morning, Michael called to say he would arrive for lunch. The project had finished earlier than he expected. I felt my stomach tighten. The hour of truth was approaching faster than I had imagined. Julia appeared in the kitchen, her eyes puffy from crying. "Good morning," she said shyly. "Good morning," I replied, pouring her coffee. "Michael will be here for lunch." She paled. "Maybe it is better if I leave before." "No," I told her firmly. "You are part of this story. He needs to see both of you, understand the whole truth. I am scared." She confessed. "He is going to hate me. Michael is fair. He will be furious, hurt, confused, but with time he will understand that you were also manipulated." Lucas woke up shortly after, radiant as always. Seeing him hug Julia, believing she was his mother, was as painful as it was revealing. The connection between them was genuine, different from Emily's calculated coldness. "Mom, you promised you would help me with the solar system project today," he reminded her excitedly. Julia looked at me, uncertain. I nodded slightly. "Of course, my love," she replied. "After breakfast, we will start." I watched them working together at the living room table, cutting colored paper to make planets, painting, laughing. Julia had a natural patience with children that Emily had never shown. It was as if I finally understood why Lucas was so confused. He felt the difference in the love. At noon, I heard Michael's car park. My heart raced. I asked Julia to stay with Lucas in the living room while I greeted him. Michael entered, tired but smiling. "Mom, it smells so good. I am starving after this work marathon." "Son," I said, holding his hands, "before anything else, we need to talk. Something very serious has happened." His smile disappeared, replaced by concern. "What happened? Is Lucas okay?" "Lucas is perfect. He is in the living room doing a school project. But it is about Emily." I took him to the kitchen, away from Lucas's ears, and told him everything. About Andrew's call, my growing suspicions, the discovery of Julia, the confrontation with Emily the night before. I showed him the letters, the bank statements, all the evidence I had gathered. Michael listened in silence, his face moving from disbelief to shock, to anger, and finally to a pain so deep it broke my heart to witness it. "Where is she now?" he asked when I finished, his voice almost unrecognizable. "In a hotel. She said she would come back today to get her things. And that—" "Julia, is she here?" "In the living room, with Lucas. She genuinely cares about him, Michael. She was manipulated just as much as you." Michael ran his hands over his face, breathing deeply to control himself. "I want to see her." I called Julia to the kitchen, asking Lucas to continue his project just for a few minutes. She entered hesitantly, her face pale with nervousness, so physically similar to Emily, but with a completely different energy. Michael stared at her in silence, seeing his wife and simultaneously a stranger. "I am so sorry," Julia whispered, tears falling down her face. "I know there are no words that can fix what I did, but I am truly sorry." Michael continued in silence, processing the impossible situation. "How long?" he asked finally. "How many times have you been in my house, in my life, pretending to be my wife?" Julia took a deep breath. "I started almost 2 years ago. At first, it was just a few hours or a day. In the last few months, longer periods, sometimes a whole week. And Lucas, how did he react to you?" He noticed the differences. Julia replied. He asked why his mother was sometimes affectionate and other times cold. It was Emily who treated him with distance, not me. I got attached to him. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to block the pain. How could I not notice? How did I not notice that sometimes I was with a completely different person? "Emily planned everything carefully," I explained. "She told me you rarely saw each other during the day due to your work." "And Julia?" "Well, she tried to follow Emily's instructions as best as possible. But still," Michael insisted with a choked voice, "a mother would notice. A husband would notice. Lucas noticed," Julia said softly. "He always knew something was wrong. He just did not understand what." A heavy silence fell over the three of us. The enormity of the situation seemed impossible to process completely. "What do I do now?" Michael asked, more to himself than to us. "How do I tell my son that his mother, that the woman I thought I knew?" "You do not need to decide everything now," I replied, squeezing his shoulder. "But Emily said she would come back today to get her things. We need to be prepared." Michael nodded slowly. "I want Lucas out of the house when she comes. He must not witness what might happen." "I can take him to the park," Julia offered shyly. Michael looked at her with a complex expression, mistrust mixed with a reluctant understanding that Julia really cared about his son. "No," he replied finally. "I appreciate the offer, but it would not be appropriate now. My mother can take him." Julia lowered her gaze, accepting the rejection as fair. "And you?" Michael asked. "What will you do after all this is over?" "I will go back to my adoptive mother. I will try to rebuild my life, find a better job to pay for her medicine." She hesitated. "But before, I want you to know that I will understand if you decide, if you want me never to come near Lucas again." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable. As involved as she was in the situation, Julia had also been a victim of Emily's manipulation. The following hours passed in a blur of tension. I took Lucas to a school friend's house, making up an excuse about a surprise we were preparing at home. Michael called his lawyer, seeking guidance on the next legal steps. Julia remained silent, sitting in the guest room, waiting. Shortly after 3 p.m, we heard a car park. Emily had returned as she had promised. Michael stood in the center of the living room, shoulders rigid, his face a mask of determination. Julia remained in the kitchen, out of sight, but close enough to witness it. I stood beside my son, determined to support him in what would be one of the hardest moments of his life. Emily entered as if nothing had happened, wearing an elegant navy blue dress and sunglasses. She took them off upon seeing Michael standing there, clearly waiting for her. "So Margaret told you," she observed, showing no surprise. "I figured this would happen. Is that all you have to say?" Michael's voice trembled with contained rage. "After years of lies, after using your own sister to deceive me while you were with another man." Emily sighed, as if she were dealing with a difficult child. "Michael, let us be adults. Marriages end. People move on. Yes, I could have handled the situation in a more conventional way, but you must admit you were so busy with your work that you would barely notice my absence anyway." Her cruel words hit Michael like a slap. How can you? And Lucas, would he also not notice his mother's absence? Lucas has you. He has his grandmother, and apparently he has my sister, who seems to love playing mommy. Emily looked toward the kitchen, where she could see Julia standing in the doorway. Right, little sister? Julia did not answer, standing firm under her sister's venomous gaze. I came to get my things, Emily continued. After this, my lawyer will be in touch about the divorce terms. I suggest you accept full custody of Lucas. It will be easier for everyone. Easier for you, you mean, Michael retorted. So you can start your new life without impediments. Emily shrugged. Call it what you want. The reality is that I have no calling for motherhood. Lucas will be better off with you. How can you speak like that about your own son? I asked, unable to contain my indignation. Honesty, Margaret. Something perhaps this family could have used more of. She looked around. Where is Lucas? I imagine you sent him away so as not to witness this melodramatic confrontation. He is with friends, Michael replied dryly. And you are right about one thing. He is better off, far away from you. Emily smiled, a cold smile that never reached her eyes. I see we agree on this point at least. Now, if you will excuse me, I'm going to get my things. She went up the stairs with the same elegance as always, as if she were simply leaving for a social engagement, not abandoning her family. Michael collapsed onto the sofa as soon as she was out of sight, the facade of strength momentarily broken. I sat beside him, holding his hand in silence. How could I marry someone like that? He whispered. How did I not see who she really was? She fooled us all, I replied softly. She lived a lie for so long that she became an expert at perpetuating it. Julia approached hesitantly. Michael, I know I have no right to say anything, but Emily was always very good at showing people exactly what they wanted to see. She studied people, learned how to please them, how to manipulate them. Michael looked at her, seeing for the first time not just the copy of his wife, but a distinct person, with her own voice, her own experiences. You really care about Lucas, do not you? He asked, his voice softer. Julia nodded with tears in her eyes. More than I can explain. I started this charade out of desperation to help my mother, but over time, Lucas became important to me. Every time Emily asked me to replace her, I secretly rejoiced at being able to see him again. A noise upstairs interrupted the conversation. Emily was coming down the stairs, dragging 2 large suitcases. I will send for the rest later, she announced. For now, this is enough. Michael stood up. Emily, before you leave, I want you to know. I will do whatever is necessary to protect Lucas. He deserves stability. He deserves genuine love. How touching, she replied, dragging the suitcases to the door. Do what you think is best. My lawyer will be in touch. She stopped at the door, looking at Julia one last time. As for you, little sister, I hope you enjoyed your little adventure in other people's lives. Remember that when the novelty wears off, you will go back to being just the sick seamstress's daughter, living in that miserable alley. Julia straightened her shoulders, finding a strength she had not shown before. I prefer to be who I am, living honestly in the miserable alley, than to be like you, Emily. Emily rolled her eyes. How noble! We will see how long that nobility lasts when reality knocks at your door. And with those words she left, closing the door behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded more definitive than a furious slam. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael, Julia, and I remained motionless, as if we had been hit by a hurricane and were still trying to assess the damage. And now? Julia asked finally. Now, Michael replied, rubbing his tired face. We need to think about Lucas, about how to tell him, about how to help him understand. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Michael filed for divorce and full custody of Lucas. Emily, as she had promised, did not contest custody, interested only in finishing the process as quickly as possible to start her new life in Europe. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Lucas. After many conversations with a child psychologist, Michael decided to tell him a simplified version of the truth. "Lucas," he told him, sitting next to his son on the bed. "You noticed that sometimes your mom seemed different, right?" The boy nodded seriously. "Sometimes she was really nice and played with me. Other times she seemed mad, even when I had not done anything wrong. That happened because—" Michael took a deep breath. "Because your mom has a twin sister. They are very alike, but they are different people, and sometimes when your mom needed to travel, Aunt Julia came to stay with you." Lucas's eyes went wide in understanding. So they were two different people. I knew something was weird. "Yes, son. And now your mom, she decided she needs to live in another country. She will not be able to be with us for a good while." Lucas's face contracted in confusion and pain. "Does she not love me anymore?" Michael hugged his son tightly. "That has nothing to do with you, Lucas. Sometimes adults make difficult decisions that hurt other people. It does not mean you did anything wrong. And Aunt Julia? Is she going to leave too?" The question took Michael by surprise. "Would you like to see Aunt Julia again?" Lucas nodded vigorously. "She was the mom who smiled the most, the one who helped me with homework and did not get mad when I spilled things." The innocent words of the child summarized the situation perfectly. Somehow, he always knew the difference between the two, even without fully understanding what was happening. At first, Michael was reluctant to allow Julia to continue having contact with Lucas. The wound of betrayal was too deep, the confusion too great. But over time, seeing Julia's genuine concern for the boy's well-being, he began to reconsider. One afternoon, about 2 months after Emily's departure, Michael called me for a serious conversation. "Mom, I have been thinking about Julia." "What about her?" I asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on his face. "Lucas asks for her constantly. He misses her." "And does that bother you?" I asked carefully. Michael sighed deeply. "At first, yes, it seemed wrong, as if I were replacing Emily with someone who looks exactly like her. But now I realize that for Lucas, Julia is not a substitute. She is someone he knows, with whom he has a genuine connection. She really cares about him." I agreed. "You saw how devastated she was when everything came to light, not because of the exposure of the farce, but because of the fear of never seeing Lucas again." "I have been visiting her regularly," Michael confessed, "taking her medicine for her mother, helping her financially. She refused at first, but I insisted. It is not fair for her to suffer the consequences of Emily's actions." I smiled, proud of my son's compassion even in the midst of his own pain. "And how is she?" "Working hard. She got a better job as an assistant in a sewing workshop. She is taking good care of her mother." He paused. "Mom, I'm thinking of inviting Julia to come visit Lucas, officially as his aunt. No secrets, no lies. Do you think it would be confusing for him? Lucas is stronger and more perceptive than we imagine," I replied. He already understood the difference between the two, even when he thought they were the same person. Now that he knows the truth, I think he would be happy to have Julia in his life. And so it was. Julia started visiting us on weekends, bringing small gifts for Lucas, helping him with school tasks, playing board games with the family. There was no longer any pretense, just a loving aunt spending time with her nephew. Over time, Julia's presence became natural in our house. Michael, initially cautious, began to appreciate her company. They talked about Lucas, about Julia's adoptive mother's progress, about the small triumphs and challenges of everyday life. 1 year after Emily's departure, we received the news that she had married Richard in Paris. Michael received the information with a calm that surprised me. "I do not feel anger anymore," he explained when I asked, "just relief at having moved on." "Are you really okay?" I insisted, worried that he was hiding his pain. Michael smiled, a genuine smile I had not seen for a long time. "Yes, Mom, what Emily did was terrible, but in a way, it set us free." Lucas is happy. I am focused on work and being a good father, and we have Julia, who brought something good into our lives." The mention of Julia came with a sparkle in his eyes that did not go unnoticed by me. In the following months, I watched as Michael and Julia's relationship blossomed naturally, without rushing, built on a solid foundation of respect and mutual admiration. 2 years after the divorce, Michael called me for a private conversation. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm afraid I am making a mistake, but at the same time, I have never been so sure of something in my life." "What happened, son?" "I'm in love with Julia," he confessed, looking simultaneously relieved and apprehensive. "I know it seems crazy. I know she is physically identical to Emily, but they are completely different people. Julia is kind, honest, hardworking. She makes me want to be a better person." I took his hands in mine. "It does not seem crazy to me, Michael. It seems like you saw beyond the appearance and found someone truly special. But what about Lucas? Would it not be confusing for him? Lucas already understands that Julia is not his mother, but someone who loves him deeply. I think he would be happy to have her even more present in his life." A few weeks later, Julia accepted Michael's invitation to dinner. It was the first of many. I watched with joy as their relationship blossomed naturally, without rushing, built on a solid foundation of respect and mutual admiration. A year later, Michael proposed. Julia cried, alternating between yes and worries about what people would think. "I do not care what they think," Michael affirmed. "I know your heart. I know who you are." The wedding was an intimate ceremony in our garden. Lucas, now 11 years old, was the proud best man for his father. Julia's adoptive mother, now healthier thanks to proper medical care, watched with tears of joy. Today, 3 years later, our family is complete again. Julia brought her mother to live with us in a small annex built especially for her. Lucas affectionately calls her Grandma Elise, having 2 grandmothers to spoil him. When I look at Julia now, I no longer see Emily's twin. I see only Julia, the kind woman who entered our lives through extraordinary circumstances and found her true place. Emily rarely gets in touch, except for impersonal birthday cards for Lucas. We learned from mutual acquaintances that her marriage to Richard has already faced several crises. It seems that the glamorous life she wanted so much came with its own set of challenges. As for me, I learned that sometimes the greatest blessings can come from the most difficult moments. That call from Andrew, which seemed like the beginning of a nightmare, ended up being the first step to freeing our family from an elaborate lie and finding a more authentic happiness. Lucas is growing strong and secure, loved by people who put him first. Michael found true love based on honesty and mutual respect. And Julia, who entered our lives as an unwilling imposter, became the heart of our family. Life has a strange way of showing us that even in the most unlikely situations, we can find redemption and second chances. Our story could have ended in bitterness and resentment. Instead, we chose forgiveness, understanding, and the courage to believe we deserved something better. Now, if you like this story, click on the next video appearing on the screen because in it there is a story of betrayal and a twist you have never seen before.